The Inheritance of Silence. Hello everyone, and welcome back. I'm grateful you've chosen to spend this time with me today. Before we begin, I want you to know that what you're about to hear is a story of family, of betrayal, and of the lengths a father will go to protect his child. Fictional details have been woven in for entertainment and educational purposes, but the lessons at its heart are real. Wherever you're joining from tonight, whether it's Mumbai, London, New York, or a small town I've never heard of, thank you for being here. Now, let me take you into a story about a man who learned that the most dangerous threats don't come from outside your home. They come from the people you've already let inside. The last time I drove down Magnolia Boulevard with anything resembling hope, the oak trees were still heavy with summer green. That was 4 years ago, when my daughter Catherine called me on a Wednesday afternoon just to tell me she'd been promoted to partner at her firm and wanted to take me to dinner. I remembered sitting in my car outside my office, listening to the pride in her voice, thinking, this is it. This is the moment a father lives for. He had raised her alone after her mother passed, and every achievement felt like proof that I hadn't failed. She was my only child, and I had poured everything I had into making sure she had the foundation I never had. That was 4 years ago this particular Tuesday morning in October. The oaks along Magnolia had already turned, burnished gold and deep russet, the kind of colors that look beautiful in photographs and feel like a warning in real life. He pulled my car to a stop in front of the wrought iron gate, the one with the ornate scrollwork that Catherine had insisted on when they renovated the entrance 3 years back. He remembered thinking it was excessive when I first saw it, an iron gate with gold accents, in a neighborhood where I had grown up knowing that a locked door was a luxury. My daughter had grown up in a house with a porch that sagged and a window that never quite sealed against the winter drafts, and now she had an iron gate with gold accents. He pressed the buzzer on the intercom. 20 seconds passed. Then the gate swung open without a word through the speaker. Catherine met me at the front door in a cream-colored sweater and jeans, the kind of clothes a woman wears when she's stopped caring about appearances and started caring about comfort. Her eyes were shadowed at the corners, and there was a tension around her jaw that I recognized immediately. It was the same tension I used to see in the mirror during the hardest years of building my business, when the bank accounts ran thin and the future looked like a brick wall with no door. "Dad," she said. She stepped aside to let me in. "Catherine." He walked past her into the foyer. The house smelled like stale coffee and something else underneath. The particular staleness of rooms that haven't had their windows opened in too long. The living room was beautiful and immaculate and felt completely empty. Expensive furniture, fresh flowers in a vase on the credenza, a painting on the wall that probably cost more than my first cat. Everything looked curated, like a hotel lobby, like a place where people performed the act of living without actually doing it. "James isn't here," Catherine said, answering the question I hadn't asked. "He went to visit his brother for the weekend." He nodded and sat down in the armchair nearest the window. Catherine sat across from me on the edge of the sofa, elbows on her knees, hands clasped in front of her. On her left wrist, the Cartier watch caught the morning light, the one I'd given her on her wedding day, engraved on the back with her initials and the date. Edith spent more than I should have on that watch. At the time, it felt important. A thing a father does to mark a moment that can't be unmarked. "You want coffee?" she asked. "I want to talk." Catherine let out a breath through her nose, slow, deliberate. The way a person exhales when they already know what's coming and have been bracing for it since the moment they opened the door. "Dad, before you start, how much this time?" The words came out flatter than I intended. Catherine is your type. She looked at the floor, then back up at me. 40,000. The number landed between us like something dropped from a height. I didn't flinch, but I felt it, a dull, heavy thud somewhere behind my sternum. Catherine. He kept my voice level. This is the 4th time in 18 months. The first time you said it was for the renovation costs running over. The second time you said it was a business opportunity that fell through. The third time. Dad. Her voice cracked at the edges. I don't need a list. He was there. Then help me understand, I said, leaning forward. Because I am sitting here trying to understand where $120,000 has gone. Your salary alone should cover. It's not that simple. She stood up abruptly, walked to the window, and pushed her hands into the pockets of her jeans. Her shoulders hunched inward, the posture of a person carrying something too heavy on a frame that was never built for that kind of weight. You don't know everything that's going on. Then tell me. Silence stretched between us. The worst kind, the kind loaded with all the words neither person is willing to say first. He watched my daughter standing at the window, her profile against the gray October sky. And I thought about the little girl who used to climb onto my lap during long nights of work because she couldn't sleep without hearing my heartbeat. The girl who made me tell her the same 3 bedtime stories in rotating order every night for 3 years because she found comfort in repetition, in knowing exactly what came next. I wondered when she'd stop knowing what came next. I'm not giving you $40,000, I said finally. Not because I don't have it. You want to be clear about that. This isn't about the money itself. I'm not giving it to you because I don't know what it's going toward, and every time I ask, I get a different story. Catherine turned from the window. The shadowing around her eyes had gone red at the rims. And when she spoke, her voice came out stripped of whatever composure she'd been holding on to since I walked in. So that's it? You just don't trust me. I trust you, I said. I don't trust the situation. That's the same thing, Dad. That's exactly the same thing. She crossed the room toward me, and for a moment, the raw hurt on her face was so complete, so unguarded, that it stopped me cold. Do you have any idea what it costs just to keep everything running? The house, the car payments, James's. She stopped herself, pressed her lips together. You've never had to ask anyone for help in your life. You built everything yourself from nothing. And you think everyone should be able to do the same thing. But we're not all you, Dad. He stood up slowly. He buttoned my jacket, a habit from 30 years in boardrooms, something to do with my hands when emotions threatened to climb into my voice. You're right, I said quietly. You're not me, and I have never wanted you to be. He picked up my car keys from the side table where I had set them when I came in, but I raised you to be honest with me. Whatever is happening in this house, Catherine, and something is happening, I can see it every time I look at you. You are not being honest with me, and I cannot help you if you won't let me in. Catherine stared at me. Her right hand came up and gripped the back of the sofa, knuckles going white with the pressure of it. I don't need you to help me, she said. The words were quiet, but they landed like a door slamming. I need you to trust me. He looked at my daughter for a long moment. At the exhaustion carved into the lines around her eyes, at the Cartier watch glinting on her wrist in the gray morning light. Call me when you're ready to talk, I said. He walked to the front door, pulled it open, and stepped out into the cool October air. "Being me," I heard Catherine say my name just once, barely above a whisper. But I kept walking, past the iron gate, across the sidewalk to my car. I sat behind the wheel for almost a full minute before I started the engine. The oak trees along Magnolia swayed in a light wind, shedding the first of their leaves onto the pavement. I didn't know then that the walk from that front door to my car would be the last ordinary moment I would have for a very long time. The walk back to my car should have taken 6 minutes. I know because I had parked on the south end of Magnolia, just past the intersection with Ashford Street, which put exactly 6 minutes of sidewalk between me and the leather seat where I could sit alone and decide whether I was angry or just exhausted. 6 minutes of oak trees and cracked pavement and the smell of someone's dryer vent pushing warm fabric softener air out through a basement grate. I didn't make it 6 minutes. The bus stop at the corner of Magnolia and Ashford was one of those old metal-framed shelters the city had never gotten around to replacing. The kind with a green plastic roof that had faded to something closer to gray and a bench that had lost 2 of its 3 bolts sometime in the previous decade. He had walked past that bench 100 times without registering it as anything other than municipal furniture. That morning, I stopped. There was a girl sitting on the far end of the bench. 12, maybe 13, with the kind of thinness that comes not from growing fast but from not eating enough. Her sneakers were the wrong size, too big, the laces knotted multiple times to keep them on her feet. Her jacket was a men's medium that swallowed her narrow shoulders whole. She had the particular stillness of a child who has learned that drawing attention to herself costs more than it's worth. She was holding something in both hands, turning it over slowly. The way a person handles an object they can't quite categorize, examining it from one angle, then rotating it, then examining it again. The morning light caught it on the 3rd rotation. My feet stopped moving before my brain had fully processed what my eyes were seeing. The chassis. The specific brushed steel finish. The crown at 3 o'clock. The width of the bezel. I knew that watch. I knew it the way you know the face of someone you love. Not by cataloging features, but by a total, instantaneous recognition that bypasses thought entirely and lands somewhere older, somewhere closer to the base of the skull. I had stood at Bellamy Jewelers on Michigan Avenue for 45 minutes choosing that watch. He had held it under the display light and asked the woman behind the counter to show me the engraving one more time before I handed over my credit card. I had wrapped it myself, in paper I'd bought specifically for the occasion, and I had handed it to Catherine on the morning of her wedding, watching her face as she read the inscription, "To Catherine, my greatest achievement, with all my love, Dad." He walked to the bench. The girl looked up when my shadow fell across her. Her eyes were brown and alert, the eyes of a kid who had learned to read approaching adults quickly and accurately. "That's a fine-looking watch," I said. He kept my voice easy, the way you talk to a stray animal you don't want to spook. The girl's hands tightened slightly around the watch, then relaxed, a decision made and unmade in under a second. "Found it," she said. Her voice was careful, not defensive, just precise. "Where did you find it?" She studied me for a moment. Whatever she saw must have satisfied some internal calculation, because she answered without hesitation. "The big house at the top of the block. The one with the iron gate." She nodded in the direction I had just come from. "There's a dumpster around the side, by the alley wall. He was looking through it yesterday evening, and it was in there, inside a black trash bag that got torn open." She paused. "It was mixed in with some clothes, a shirt and pants mostly. They had red stains on them." A lot of red. The words landed on me one at a time, each one heavier than the last. He held out my hand slowly, palm up. May I see it? The girl looked at my hand, then at my face. Then she placed the watch in my palm with a carefulness that told me she understood, on some level, that this moment mattered. He turned it over. On the back, the engraving caught the light exactly as I remembered it from the jeweler's display case. Catherine at Whitfield, May 15th, 2021. My daughter's initials, my daughter's wedding date. The watch I had given her 3 years ago with my hand on her shoulder, and something in my chest that I hadn't been able to name at the time, but now understood as the particular grief of a parent watching a child step fully into a life that no longer centers on you. Sir. The girl's voice came from somewhere that suddenly felt very far away. Are you all right? He closed my fingers around the watch. Behind the girl, the door of a small coffee shop pushed open. The kind of narrow storefront wedged between a dry cleaner and a tax prep office, the hand-painted sign in the window reading Ashford Cafe in letters that someone had clearly repainted at least twice. A young woman stepped out carrying a paper cup and a small paper bag. She had dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and moved with the efficient economy of someone halfway through a long shift. She stopped when she saw the girl, and the professional efficiency dropped out of her expression completely, replaced by something uncomplicated and warm. Maya, she said, I saved you the last blueberry muffin. It's a little smashed, but it's still good. She held out the paper bag, then noticed me standing there and shifted her weight, not wary, just recalibrating. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You didn't, I said. The girl, Maya, took the paper bag with both hands and said, Thank you, Miss Diane, with the kind of manners that suggested someone had once cared enough to teach them to her, even if that someone was no longer around. Diane. He filed the name away without fully knowing why. He looked down at the watch in my hand. Then I looked at Maya. The clothes, the ones with the red stains, do you still have them? Maya glanced at Diane, then back at me. I kept them, she said slowly, in my bag. I don't know why. Something felt wrong about leaving them there. Something felt wrong. A 12-year-old girl with not enough food and shoes 3 sizes too big had looked at a torn trash bag behind an iron-gated mansion and known, with whatever instinct the vulnerable develop out of pure necessity, that something was wrong. He reached into my jacket pocket and took out one of my business cards, plain white, name and number, nothing else. He held it out to Maya. My name is Edward Whitfield, I said. If you still have those clothes, I'd like you to keep them safe. Don't let anyone take them. Can you do that for me? Maya took the card and looked at it for a long moment. Is the watch yours? It belonged to my daughter, I said. I gave it to her. Maya nodded slowly, with the gravity of someone twice her age processing information that carries real weight. Okay, Mary Whitfield, she said. I'll keep them safe. I looked once more toward the top of Magnolia, where the iron gate of my daughter's house glinted faintly through the turning oaks. The red stains on a torn black bag, the watch engraved with a name I had given my daughter at birth, and a date I had watched her begin her future. Something was very wrong inside that house, and I had walked away from it that morning without knowing how wrong. He sat in my car for 8 minutes before I turned the key in the ignition. Not because I needed to calm down, I had spent 30 years learning to keep calm in rooms where calm was the most expensive thing you could bring to the table. He said because I needed to think clearly, and thinking clearly required separating what I knew from what I felt. What I knew, my daughter's watch had been found in a trash bag behind her house, alongside clothing with significant red staining, by a homeless child who had been rooting through the garbage for food. What I felt was something I wasn't prepared to examine yet. He turned the car around. The iron gate was still open from my visit 20 minutes earlier. He pulled straight into the driveway, cut the engine, and walked to the front door without rehearsing what I was going to say. Rehearsed conversations have a way of collapsing the moment the other person says something you didn't script for them. Catherine answered on the second knock. She had changed into a cream-colored blouse in the time I'd been gone. The kind of rapid wardrobe adjustment that signals a person trying to reassemble their composure along with their clothing. Her expression cycled through surprise, then weariness, then something that tried to look like irritation and didn't quite make it. "Dad, you forgot something." "No," I said. "I found something." He held up the Cartier watch. The color left Catherine's face in a single, uniform withdrawal. The way water drains from a bathtub, all at once, completely, leaving nothing behind. Her right hand came up and gripped the door frame. He watched her knuckles go from pink to white in under 2 seconds. "Where did you?" She stopped herself, swallowed. "Where did you get that?" "A girl at the bus stop on Ashford was holding it," I said. "She found it in a torn trash bag behind your dumpster, along with some clothing." He paused. "Clothing with a great deal of red staining on it." Catherine's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes moved to a point somewhere past my left shoulder, the involuntary gaze shift of someone whose mind is running faster than their mouth and hasn't landed on a story yet. Then she landed on one. That watch. She let go of the doorframe and crossed her arms over her chest, a physical act of self-containment, of pulling inward. "Someone grabbed it off my wrist about a week ago, outside the dry cleaner on Halstead. I didn't want to tell you because I knew I knew you'd make it into a whole thing." "A whole thing?" He repeated. "You know what I mean." She shifted her weight. "I filed a report. It's being handled." I looked at my daughter's face. He had negotiated contracts with people who had spent their entire professional lives learning to say false things convincingly. And I had learned over 30 years to listen not for what people said, but for the architecture of how they said it, the micropause before a number, the slight uptick in vocal pitch when a claim was being constructed rather than recalled. "And the clothing?" he asked. "The shirt and pants with the staining?" Something moved behind Catherine's eyes, a fractional recalibration, barely visible. The kind of adjustment a person makes when they realize the question they're being asked wasn't the one they prepared for. "Old yard work clothes," she said. Her voice had found its footing now, steadier than it had been 30 seconds ago. "James cut himself doing some work in the garden last week. Nothing serious. He tossed them because the stains wouldn't come out." She gave a small, dismissive shrug that was working too hard to be casual. "I honestly don't see what the big deal is, Dad. Our watch got stolen and I threw away a pair of old clothes. That's it." At that moment, the sound of heels on hardwood came from somewhere deeper in the house, a precise, unhurried rhythm, the walk of a woman who moves through spaces as though they were designed around her. James's mother, Eleanor, appeared in the hallway behind Catherine. She was exactly as put together as she always was. Silk blouse, dark trousers, hair arranged in a way that suggested effortlessness while communicating considerable effort. She was holding a coffee mug in both hands and wearing the particular expression she reserved for my visits, a smile that engaged every correct facial muscle and reached precisely as far as the corners of her mouth. "Edward," she said warmly. "I didn't know you were coming back. Can I get you something? He just made a fresh pot." "No, thank you, Eleanor. Here I moved to the Cartier watch in my hand." A flicker of something crossed her face, so brief and so quickly replaced by the warm smile that I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for exactly that kind of movement. She looked at Catherine, then back at me. "Is everything all right?" "Fine," Catherine said too quickly. "Dad was just returning something. He was on his way out." He looked at my daughter. Then I looked at her mother-in-law. Then I looked at the Cartier watch in my hand, at the engraving on the back, Catherine's name, the wedding date that Eleanor had been present for and that I had marked by giving my daughter this specific object. He held it out to Catherine. "Here," I said. "Take it." Catherine reached out and took the watch. Her fingers closed around it, and for just a moment, a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face that wasn't relief or gratitude or even discomfort. It was the expression of a person receiving back something they had thrown away on purpose and finding that they cannot explain to the person returning it why they threw it away in the first place. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were not. He said goodbye to Eleanor. She said it was always good to see me, and the warmth in her voice was so consistent and so perfectly calibrated that it would have been entirely convincing to anyone who hadn't just watched her eyes move to the watch in my hand before a single word had been spoken. He walked back down the front steps to my car. 2 lies. 2 separate events. 2 explanations delivered smoothly, one after the other, in the space of 3 minutes. The stolen watch and the yard work clothes. Unconnected, innocent, both easily dismissed. Except the girl at the bus stop had found them together in the same bag behind the same house. He pulled out of the driveway onto Magnolia and pointed the car south. 60 years of reading rooms had taught me one reliable truth: when a person constructs 2 separate lies to explain 2 details of the same event, it is almost never because the details are actually separate. It is because they are connected in a way the person cannot afford to let you see. My daughter had looked me in the eye and lied to my face twice in under 3 minutes, and her mother-in-law had stood in the hallway behind her and watched it happen without blinking. I pressed the accelerator and let the Oakland street fall away behind me. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a door that I had been trying to keep closed for 18 months had just swung open on its own, and I already knew I was not going to be able to shut it again. Hugo Schmidt had been fixing watches in the same storefront on Dearborn Street for 33 years. And in all that time, he had moved exactly 3 things. The position of his workbench lamp, the brand of coffee he kept in the back room, and the photograph of his late wife that had migrated from the left wall to the right wall sometime after she passed. Everything else, the glass display cases, the hand-lettered sign above the door reading Schmidt timepieces, the particular smell of machine oil and cedar that hit you the moment you stepped inside, had remained unchanged since the first Bush administration. And Hugo seemed to consider this a point of pride. He had known Hugo Schmidt since we were both 25 years old and broke in the way that young men who intend to be something are broke, temporarily, impatiently, with a specific future in mind. He had been the best man at my first business lunch, which is to say he had loaned me the money for it when my own account came up short. 42 years had passed since then. He was the only person alive who had known me before I had anything worth knowing me for. The bell above the door announced me when I walked in at 2 that afternoon. Hugo was bent over his workbench, a loop pressed to his right eye, both hands occupied with something I couldn't see. He held up one finger without looking up, his standard greeting, which meant sit down and give me 90 seconds, which I did. The bench stool near the window was where I always sat. He set the Cartier watch on the glass display case beside me and waited. Hugo finished what he was doing, set his tools down in their designated slots with the precision of a man who has never once misplaced anything in his life, and straightened up. It was 70 now, heavier than he'd been at 25, with the kind of white hair that looks deliberate on some men and simply earned on others. On Hugo, it looked earned. He walked over, glanced at the watch on the display case, and then looked at my face. "How bad?" he said. That was Hugo. 42 years of friendship, and he could read the room in 4 seconds. "I don't know yet," I said. "That's why I'm here." He picked up the Cartier watch without being asked and carried it to his workbench. He didn't need the loop for the exterior. He turned it over twice, held it at an angle under the lamp, ran his thumbnail along the edge of the case. Then he reached for the loop after all, pressed it to his eye, and tilted the watch face down under the light. He watched him go still, not the stillness of concentration, he had been concentrated the whole time. This was a different kind of still, the kind that happens when a person finds exactly what they were not expecting to find. "Edward." His voice had changed register. "Come here." I crossed to the workbench and leaned in. Hugo angled the watch under the lamp so that the light caught the inside of the crystal at the precise angle he'd found. There it was, a hairline scratch, barely 2 millimeters long, shaped unmistakably like the letter V, faint enough that you would miss it if you weren't looking. Impossible to miss once you knew where to look. "I put that there," Hugo said. He set the loop down and looked at me with an expression I had only seen on his face a handful of times in 4 decades. The expression of a man whose certainty on a matter carries no comfort whatsoever. The day before Catherine's wedding, I was adjusting the movement, the rotor was running slightly fast, common issue with that reference, and my steadying tool slipped just for a second. Left that mark on the inside of the crystal. It paused. "I thought about telling you. Decided it was too small to matter." "It matters now," I said. "Yes." Hugo set the watch down on the felt mat beside his lamp. "It does." He pulled his stool out and sat down heavily, the way a man sits when he's not thinking about sitting. "This is Catherine's watch. Not a duplicate, not a similar model. This exact watch. And you found it." A girl at the bus stop was holding it. She pulled it out of a trash bag behind Catherine's house. Hugo was quiet for a moment. His right hand moved to the watch and rested there without picking it up, a gesture of contact more than examination. "Catherine told me it was stolen," I said. "Off her wrist on Halstead Street." Hugo looked at me. "And the trash bag, old yard clothes," she said. "James cut himself gardening." Hugo's jaw shifted, the particular movement his face made when he was working through something he didn't like, the shape of 2 separate explanations, he said, "for 2 things that were found together." "Yes. That's sloppy," Hugo said. "It was not a judgment of character. It was the assessment of a man who spent his professional life identifying the point at which precision failed. That's someone explaining under pressure, without enough time to make the stories fit." He sat down on the bench stool. The afternoon light through the front window fell across the display cases, catching the faces of 24 watches, all of them keeping perfect time, none of them able to tell me what I actually needed to know. There's something else, I said, and I told him about the red staining on the clothing, about Maya keeping the bag, about Eleanor's eyes moving to the watch in my hand before a single word had been spoken. Hugo listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I valued most about him. When I finished, he was quiet for a full 10 seconds. Not the silence of someone who has nothing to say, but the silence of someone who is choosing carefully between several things they could say and selecting the most useful one. Catherine's in trouble, he said finally. Not the kind you fix by giving her money. No, the kind where someone else is driving and she's in the passenger seat. I looked at the watch on the felt mat, Catherine's initials, Catherine's wedding date. Found in a trash bag outside Catherine's house by a child who was hungry enough to be sorting through garbage at dusk. Hugo, I said, you still have the copy of my original partnership agreement, the one from when I first incorporated. He frowned slightly at the change of direction, then nodded slowly. In the fireproof cabinet, where it's been since 1987. Why? I'm not sure yet, I said honestly. Keep it where it is, and don't tell anyone you have it. Hugo studied me for a long moment. Then he reached under the workbench and came up with 2 mugs and a thermos of coffee, the same ritual he had performed every time I brought him a problem worth sitting with. You're going to need to be careful, Edward, he said, bowing. Whatever is happening in that house, and something is happening, you don't need me to tell you that, these things have a way of moving faster than people expect once they start moving. I know. And Catherine. He handed me a mug. Whatever she's done, or not done, she's still your daughter. He wrapped both hands around the mug. The coffee was too hot to drink yet, but the warmth helped. I know that, though, I said. Hugo nodded once and picked up his own mug. Outside on Dearborn Street, a city bus exhaled at the curb, its doors opening and closing with the indifferent rhythm of a thing that keeps moving regardless of what's happening on the sidewalk around it. Then start there, Hugo said. Start with what you know and work forward. Don't let what you're afraid of finding pull you ahead of the evidence. It was the best advice anyone gave me in the weeks that followed. He did not always manage to take it, but I heard it, sitting in Hugo's shop on that October afternoon with my daughter's watch on the felt mat between us and the smell of machine oil and cedar filling the room. And I understood that the man sitting across from me was not just an old friend helping me think through a problem. It was the only witness to a mark on a watch crystal that was about to become the first solid piece of evidence in the most important investigation of my life. He called Marcus Webb on Wednesday morning. Marcus ran a private investigations firm out of a second-floor office on West Monroe Street. The kind of operation that had no sign on the door and no listing in any directory you could find without already knowing where to look. He had used him twice before, both times in the context of business acquisitions where the seller's disclosed financials had a particular smell to them. It was methodical, discreet, and allergic to drama, which made him exactly the kind of person you want when drama is already present in sufficient quantity. I gave him Catherine's name, James's name, and the address on Magnolia. I told him I needed a financial picture, bank accounts, credit lines, any debt instruments he could locate, and anything on Eleanor's background that predated her son's marriage to my daughter. He told him I needed it within 72 hours. He told me it would cost me. He told him I was aware of that. Then I went back to work and waited. The waiting was the hardest part. Not because I was impatient, but because waiting meant thinking, and thinking meant circling back to the same images on a loop, Catherine's face straining of color when she saw the watch, the smooth delivery of two separate lies, Eleanor's eyes moving to the Cartier watch before a single word had been spoken. I had built a 30-year career on the ability to read a room accurately, and every instinct I had developed in those 30 years was telling me the same thing. Something was being managed inside that house, and my daughter was not the one managing it. Marcus called me back on Friday afternoon, earlier than I'd expected. He took the call in my car, parked in the garage beneath my office building, because it was the most private space I had access to on short notice. Marcus had a habit of speaking in the clipped, declarative style of a man who charges by the hour and respects his client's time. No preamble, no editorializing, just sequenced information delivered at a pace you could follow. Your son-in-law, he said, has been carrying approximately $42,000 in personal debt for at least the past 18 months. Credit cards, mostly, plus 2 personal loans from separate lenders. He's been making minimum payments on all of it. He let that land. Your daughter, Marcus continued, has a gambling problem. Sports betting primarily. Online platforms and at least 2 in-person establishments I was able to confirm. Her losses over the past 24 months come to somewhere between $120,000 and $140,000, based on what I could document. The actual number is likely higher. $130,000. The number had a physical weight to it. He pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of my nose and breathed. She's been borrowing, Marcus continued. From a private lender, not a bank. The kind of arrangement that doesn't get filed with any regulatory body. The interest terms on this type of lending are significantly less favorable than conventional financing. How much does she owe this lender, as of 10 days ago? Approximately $83,000. He was quiet for a moment. In the concrete silence of the parking garage, the number hung in the air between the phone and my ear with the particular density of information that changes the shape of everything around it. The mother-in-law, I said. Does she know about the debt? That, Marcus said, is the interesting part. He walked me through it methodically. Eleanor had known about Catherine's gambling losses since at least 8 months into the marriage, which meant she had known for over a year. She had not helped Catherine address them. She had not pushed her toward any kind of structured repayment or counseling or formal debt resolution. Instead, she had done something considerably more deliberate. She had positioned herself as the person managing the situation, which gave her complete visibility into Catherine's financial vulnerability and complete control over what Catherine knew and didn't know about the options available to her. She's been telling Catherine, Marcus said, based on communications I was able to review, that her only viable option is to get money from you. That banks won't touch her given the debt load and the nature of the lender. That her credit is too damaged for any conventional solution. That you're the only path forward. He stared at the gray concrete pillar in front of my car. Is that true? He asked. Is she actually out of conventional options? No, Marcus said flatly. She has limited options, but she has options. There are debt restructuring paths, lender negotiation possibilities, even some legal remedies depending on the terms of the original lending agreement. Eleanor has not told her about any of them. David was. Eleanor was not helping Catherine manage a crisis. She was maintaining the crisis, keeping it at exactly the right temperature, hot enough to generate urgency, controlled enough to prevent Catherine from seeking help anywhere except the single source Eleanor had identified as most useful to her. Every time Catherine had come to me asking for money, she had come believing it was the only door left open. Eleanor had made sure of that. She had walked ahead of Catherine through every room and locked every other door before she got there. He thought about the 18 months of requests, the escalating amounts, the way Catherine always seemed simultaneously desperate and evasive. The particular combination of a person who genuinely needs help and has been coached not to explain why. He had read that evasiveness is deception. So much of it was, but underneath the deception, there had been something else, the scripted quality of a person delivering a message they have been given, rather than one they have composed themselves. My daughter had been walking into my office, my home, my life, carrying words that her mother-in-law had put in her mouth, and I had been sending her back empty-handed, watching her get more desperate with each visit, not understanding that the desperation was being carefully maintained by someone who had a use for it. One more thing, Marcus said. The private lender, the man Catherine owes $83,000 to. A brief pause. He's been in contact with Eleanor directly, separate from his communications with Catherine. He have dates and durations. I don't have content yet, but the pattern of contact suggests coordination rather than coincidence. He closed my eyes. Eleanor was talking to the man who was threatening my daughter, secretly, without Catherine's knowledge. The shape of it was becoming clear now, not all of it. Catherine's hands were shaking when she poured the coffee. He watched her from across the kitchen island, the Cartier watch back on her wrist, catching the morning light as she moved. She had called me at 7:30 that Saturday morning, her voice thin and stretched in a way that suggested she hadn't slept. Dad, can you come over? I need to tell you something. He had been at her house in 20 minutes. Now she set the mug in front of me and sat down on the stool across the counter, her fingers wrapped around her own cup like it was the only solid thing in the room. The kitchen was immaculate, white marble countertops, stainless steel appliances, a vase of fresh flowers on the windowsill. It looked like a showroom. It felt like a prison. He watched her face in the pale morning light, searching for the daughter I remembered, the one who used to laugh freely and call me just to share good news. That daughter was still in there somewhere, buried under 18 months of fear and shame and manipulation. He just needed to reach her. I know you're not going to believe me, she said, not meeting my eyes. But I want to explain. Everything. From the beginning. He waited, giving her the space she needed. The first bet was $50. A football game. James's brother had a pool going, and I thought it would be fun. Used something to do. She laughed, a small hollow sound that didn't reach her eyes. He won. $200. And I thought I was good at it. He thought I had some kind of talent. He said nothing, letting her words fill the space between us. It wasn't about the money at first. It was about the feeling. The way everything else goes quiet. The way you're so focused on what's happening that you can't think about anything else. She pressed her lips together. And then it became about the money, because I started losing. And losing felt worse than winning felt good, so I kept chasing it. One more bet. One more game. EAJ win it back this time. Do you know how that goes? He did know. He had seen it before, in business partners who couldn't admit they'd made a bad investment, in friends who kept pouring money into failing ventures because walking away felt like failure. He had seen it, but I had never expected to see it in my daughter. Eleanor found out about a year ago, Catherine continued, her voice dropping lower. She went through my mail. She said she was looking for a package, but she found a credit card statement instead. And she... Caterina's voice caught. She didn't get angry. She didn't even seem surprised. She just sat me down and told me she could help. She said she had connections, people who could consolidate the debt, people who could make it go away. She said I just needed to trust her. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the cool marble counter. Catherine, listen to me carefully. Eleanor is not helping you. She is using your debt to control you. Catherine shook her head, a quick jerky motion. No, Dad, you don't understand. Sis been the only one who's been there for me. She's the one who's been keeping everything together. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Did she tell you that? Catherine looked away, her jaw tight. She said you wouldn't understand. She said you'd judge me. She said, she stopped. She said you'd use it against me somehow. That you'd see it as proof that you were right all along. That I couldn't make it on my own. The words hung in the air between us, and I heard Eleanor's voice in every syllable. I had been watching my daughter's descent for 18 months, and I had blamed it on her choices, her weakness, her stubbornness. He had not once considered that someone was pushing her down while pretending to hold her up. Catherine, I said quietly, I need you to think about something. When you came to me asking for money, who told you to come? Who told you I was the only option? She opened her mouth, then closed it. He watched the realization spread across her face, slow and painful. Eleanor gave you the words, I said. She gave you the script. And every time you came to me, and I turned you away, she was there to tell you it was my fault. That I didn't love you. That I was punishing you. That I was the enemy, and she was the only one who had your back. Catherine's eyes were bright with tears, but she didn't blink. She didn't look away. Dad, her voice cracked. I didn't see it. I didn't see any of it. He reached across the counter and took her hand. That's because she didn't want you to see it. She needed you desperate. She needed you isolated. She needed you to believe that everyone else had abandoned you so that you would cling to her. And it worked. Catherine pulled her hand away, pressed it against her mouth, and turned toward the window. Her shoulders shook once, twice, a violent tremor that she tried to suppress and failed. He let her have the silence. I let her have the space to feel the shape of what she'd just understood. After a long moment, she turned back to me, her face streaked but steadier now. The watch, she said. Her voice was calmer, more controlled. He threw it away. That night. The night I found out how much I really owed. He was so angry, at myself, at everything. He took it off and I threw it in the trash. And Eleanor found it, and she told me. Catherine closed her eyes. She told me I should leave it there. She said it was a symbol of everything I'd failed to become, and I'd be better off without it. She said keeping it would only remind me of the person I used to be, and I couldn't be that person anymore. Not with the mess I'd made of my life. I felt something move through me, a cold steady rage that I had learned to contain over 30 years of boardroom battles, but that had never been directed at anyone who had hurt my child before. And the clothes? He asked. The ones with the red stains? Caterina's face went pale, the color draining so quickly I thought she might faint. That was James, she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. He was trying to stop me. He found the bottle in my closet, the one I'd been hiding. He didn't know about the gambling. He didn't know about any of it. He just thought I was drinking too much, and he tried to take the bottle away, and she stopped. I hit him. I didn't mean to. He was so drunk I couldn't even stand up straight. But I hit him, and he fell, and he cut his arm on the corner of the coffee table. There was blood everywhere. He thought I'd killed him. Her voice broke on the last word. He wasn't even angry. He just sat there, holding his arm, looking at me like I was a stranger. And then he cleaned himself up and put on a jacket and went to the emergency room without saying a word to me. He hasn't said a word to me about it since. Eleanor was there, I said, not a question. Catherine nodded slowly, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. She heard everything. She came downstairs and saw the blood and James's jacket, and she took charge. She helped him get to the car. She told me to stay inside, that she'd handle it. And then she came back, and she said, Catherine's voice dropped again. She said she'd keep the secret if I'd stop fighting her. If I'd stop trying to get away from her. If I'd just do what she said. He closed my eyes for a moment, holding the full weight of what my daughter had just told me. Eleanor had not just orchestrated Catherine's financial destruction. She had witnessed a moment of Catherine's worst self. And she had used it as leverage to ensure Catherine would never escape. The silence in the kitchen stretched between us, heavy and thick. The coffee on the counter had gone cold. Outside, the October wind shook the oak trees on Magnolia Boulevard, and the last of the golden leaves spiraled down onto the pavement. I need you to come with me, I said. Catherine looked up, her face blotched and exhausted, but something in her eyes had changed. The desperation was still there, but underneath it, something else. Something that looked almost like hope. Where are we going? He stood up and picked up my keys. To see a man about a document, I said. And then to see a lawyer. You're not fighting this alone anymore. Catherine stood slowly, her legs unsteady beneath her. She didn't argue. She didn't resist. She just nodded and reached for her coat. I watched her pull it on, the same coat she'd been wearing the day I'd found the watch at the bus stop, and I thought about all the mornings I'd driven past this house without stopping. All the times I'd told myself she needed space, needed to figure things out on her own. All the ways I'd let my pride and my frustration keep me from seeing what was right in front of me. That ended today. We drove to Hugo's shop in silence, Catherine staring out the passenger window at the passing streets, her reflection ghostly in the glass. I could see her turning something over in her mind, some internal calculation I couldn't follow. I didn't push. Hugo was waiting for us when we arrived, the door already unlocked, the coffee already brewing. He had cleared his workbench, pushed aside the watches and tools, and laid out a single document on the felt mat. He recognized it immediately. The partnership agreement from 1987, the one I'd signed when I was 25 years old, the one that had started everything. I've been thinking about what you said, Hugo told me, his voice low. About keeping this safe. About what it means. He nodded, guiding Catherine to a chair. I need you to look at something, I said to her. I need you to see what your mother-in-law has been building behind your back. Hugo unfolded a second document. The scanned copy Marcus had sent me of the forged signature. He placed it next to the original on the felt mat, side by side, and handed me his loupe. Look at the terminal stroke on the second, Efe, in your surname, he said. On the original, it curves inward. On the forgery, it goes straight. Whoever did this studied a photocopy, not the original. They missed the pressure variations, the pen angle. Catherine leaned forward, her brow furrowed. I don't understand. What is this? I set the loop down. This is a forged document, Catherine. Someone used it to transfer 40% of my company's voting shares to an entity called Meridian Holdings LLC. Someone forged my signature, and they did it well enough to fool the registry clerk. But they couldn't fool Hugo. Catherine stared at the document, her face going pale again. Eleanor. He nodded slowly. We have evidence. Marcus, the investigator I hired, he's been building a case for weeks. Financial records, communications, a pattern of control that goes back years. Catherine pressed her hand to her mouth. But what? What does she want? She already has everything. She lives in that house. She has access to. She stopped. She wants the company, I said quietly. She wants what I built. She wants control, and she's been willing to destroy you to get it. Catherine was silent for a long moment. Then she asked, her voice barely audible, what do we do now? I looked at Hugo, who nodded slowly. We go see Patricia Hill, I said. She's my attorney. She's been handling my legal affairs for 20 years. She knows what we're dealing with, and she's already started preparing the case. But she needs you. She needs your testimony. She needs to hear from you directly what Eleanor did, how she manipulated you, what she threatened. Catherine is your type. She looked at the forged document on the felt mat, then at me, and something hardened in her expression. Not the brittle defensiveness I'd seen so often over the past 18 months, but something deeper. Something that looked like resolve. I'll do it, she said. I'll do whatever it takes to stop her. Patricia Hill's office was on the 32nd floor of a glass tower in the Loop, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the river. He had always found that view clarifying. Something about the scale of moving water puts the dimensions of human problems into perspective without being dismissive. Catherine sat beside me in one of the leather chairs, her hands clasped in her lap, her spine straight. She was nervous, I could see it in the tension around her mouth, but she was present. She was engaged. She was ready. Patricia listened to Catherine's account without interruption, her pen moving across her legal pad only occasionally. She asked clarifying questions. Specific dates, specific amounts, specific words Eleanor had used. She didn't judge, didn't react with surprise or disapproval. She just noted, and listened, and when Catherine finished, she set her pen down and leaned forward. Ms. Whitfield, she said, I want to be very clear with you about what you've just described. The conduct you detailed. The financial manipulation, the threats, the exploitation of your gambling addiction to control your actions, the use of your husband's injury as leverage, constitutes criminal extortion under Illinois law. Eleanor Mason is not just someone who took advantage of your vulnerability. She systematically created that vulnerability, maintained it, and weaponized it against you. Catherine nodded slowly. Her hands were trembling, but her voice was steady. What happens now? Patricia opened a thick file on her desk. We've been building a case for the past 2 weeks, based on the evidence your father has provided. We have the forged signature document, we have financial records showing the pattern of control, we have the testimony of a witness who observed Eleanor meeting with the private lender. Catherine's head snapped up. Meeting with him? Eleanor met with him? Patricia nodded. Yes. A woman named Diane Vance, who works at the Ashford Cafe, has provided a sworn statement that she observed Eleanor Mason meeting regularly with Vincent Calder at the cafe. She heard them discussing numbers, timelines, and what she described as pressure being applied to someone in the family. Her testimony, combined with the other evidence, establishes a clear pattern of coordinated activity. Catherine stared at Patricia, her face a mask of shock. She was working with him. The man I owed money to. She was working with him the whole time. Patricia didn't soften her words. Yes. She was not helping you manage your debt, Mr. Whitfield. She was helping the lender manage you. Catherine turned to me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Dad, she stopped, pressing her hand to her mouth. I thought she was the only one who cared about me. He thought she was saving me. He reached over and took her hand. I know, I said. That's what she wanted you to think. That's how she kept you trapped. Catherine held onto my hand for a long moment, her grip so tight I could feel her pulse through her fingers. Then she released it, straightened up, and looked at Patricia. What do you need from me? Patricia slid a document across the desk. I need you to sign a formal witness statement, detailing everything you've told me today. I need you to be prepared to testify, both to the grand jury and potentially at trial. I need you to understand that by doing this, you are putting yourself in a position where Eleanor Mason's attorneys will attempt to discredit you, to paint you as unreliable, as the one who was the problem. Catherine picked up the pen without hesitation. I don't care what they do to me, she said. I just want her to stop. I want to be free of her. I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror again. She signed the statement with a steady hand, and when she set the pen down, something in her face had changed. The shame was still there, but it had been joined by something else. Something that looked like the beginning of pride. We left Patricia's office at 6:30 that evening, the city lights beginning to flicker on against the darkening sky. Catherine was quiet in the car, staring out the window as I drove south toward the expressway. I didn't push her to talk. He had learned over the years that silence is not always a wall, sometimes it's a bridge, and you have to let people cross it at their own pace. Dad, she said finally, just as we were passing the sign for the exit to her neighborhood, I don't know how to thank you. I don't know how to make up for everything I said. The things I accused you of, the way I pushed you away. He glanced at her. You don't have to thank me. You just have to keep going. She turned to me, her face lit by the passing streetlights. I'm scared. I know I have to do this, and I'm going to do it, but I'm terrified. He reached over and squeezed her hand. That's okay. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway. She squeezed my hand back, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw the girl she used to be. The one who believed in me. The one I'd been trying to protect all along, even when I didn't know how. He called Marcus Webb on Monday morning, 3 days after Catherine had signed her statement. I need a full timeline, I said. Everything Eleanor has done, everything she's touched, every person she's contacted. You need to know how deep this goes. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You're not going to like what I've found, he said finally. I'm going to send you a file. Read it before you do anything else. The file arrived in my secure inbox at 2:15 that afternoon. He opened it at my desk, closed the door to my office, and read it through from beginning to end. What I found made my blood run cold. Eleanor Mason had been building her web long before Catherine ever met James. She had done it before, to a man named Gerald Wentworth, a retired businessman in the neighboring town. She had constructed a false identity, gained access to his finances, and attempted to transfer ownership of his assets before he discovered what was happening. Wentworth had not pressed charges. He had quietly absorbed the loss and moved on, but Marcus had found documentation of the incident through a contact in his business network. The file also contained evidence of Eleanor's communications with Vincent Calder, spanning 9 months. There were emails, phone records, and documented meetings, all of which showed a coordinated effort to keep Catherine trapped, to ensure she had no path forward except through Eleanor. I had thought I understood the depth of Eleanor's manipulation, but I hadn't seen the full picture until that moment. She had been working on Catherine for years, not just months. She had identified Catherine's vulnerability, the need for approval, the fear of failure, the longing for a family she'd never fully had, and she had exploited every single gap. He called Patricia immediately. "I have more," I said. Marcus found evidence of a prior incident. Eleanor did this before, to someone named Gerald Wentworth. Sammy pattern. Sammy method. Patricia was silent for a moment. "That changes things," she said. "That establishes a pattern of conduct that will be admissible at trial. It demonstrates intentionality and premeditation." He leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "How long until we can move?" Patricia's voice was steady, measured. "I've already contacted the assistant U.S. attorney's office. The securities fraud on the share transfer crosses into federal jurisdiction. We're looking at a potential federal case, not just state charges." He processed that. "When do we move?" Patricia paused. "I need 2 more things before I'm comfortable proceeding. I need Catherine's husband, James, to provide a formal statement about the incident with the blood on his arm. And I need to know that Catherine is stable enough to testify." He closed my eyes. "I'll talk to James. And Catherine. She's stronger than she looks." Finding James Mason was harder than I expected. He had moved out of the Magnolia Boulevard house 3 weeks earlier, quietly, without telling Catherine where he was going. Marcus located him at a small apartment on the north side of the city, in a neighborhood that was modest but clean. He drove there on Tuesday afternoon and sat outside for 10 minutes before I worked up the courage to knock on the door. James opened it cautiously, his face guarded. He was a tall man with tired eyes and a quiet way of moving that I'd always appreciated. "Edward," he said, surprised. "I didn't expect." I held up a hand. "I know. I'm sorry to show up like this. But I need to talk to you. It's about Catherine." He studied me for a long moment, then stepped aside to let me in. The apartment was small and sparse, a couch, a table, a few books on a shelf. It looked like the temporary residence of someone who didn't plan to stay long. James sat down on the couch, his hands clasped between his knees, and waited. He sat across from him in a wooden chair and told him everything. The forged documents. Eleanor's manipulation. Caterina's addiction. The meeting with the assistant U.S. attorney. James listened without interrupting, his face growing harder with each word. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I didn't know about the gambling. I mean, I suspected something, but I didn't know the extent of it." And Eleanor, he shook his head. "I knew she was controlling. He knew she could be manipulative. But I didn't know she was capable of this." He leaned forward. I need you to testify, James. I need you to tell them about the night of the blood, about Catherine's arm, about what you saw and what you heard. Your testimony could be the difference between Eleanor walking away and Eleanor facing consequences. James pressed his lips together. He looked at his hands, then at me, then back at his hands. I love Catherine, he said quietly. I have never stopped loving her, even when it was hard. Even when I had to leave. It was. But I was scared. Scared of her. Scared of what she was becoming. Scared of Eleanor. She had so much control over everything, I didn't know how to fight it. He nodded slowly. I know. He was scared too. We were all scared. But we can't be scared anymore. We have to stand together, or she'll keep winning. James raised his head and met my eyes. Okay, he said. I'll do it. We met at Patricia's office on Friday morning, James, Catherine, and me. It was the first time Catherine and James had been in the same room in weeks, and the air between them was thick with everything that had been said and left unsaid. They sat across from each other at the conference table, their hands resting on their knees, not quite meeting each other's eyes. Patricia, as always, was the professional anchor in the room. She laid out the plan calmly and carefully, explaining the timeline, the evidence, the roles each of them would play. Caterina's testimony would establish the pattern of control. James's testimony would provide the corroborating detail, the physical evidence of the net that had become Eleanor's ultimate weapon. Together, their statements would paint a complete picture of a woman who had systematically dismantled a family to get what she wanted. When Patricia finished, she looked at Catherine and James. Before we proceed, she said, I need to know that you're both fully committed. These will not be easy. Eleanor's attorneys will do everything in their power to discredit you, to make you look unreliable, to attack your credibility. You need to be prepared for that. Catherine reached across the table and took James's hand. It didn't pull away. We're ready, she said. James squeezed her hand, and the gesture was so small, so simple, that it nearly broke me. We're ready, he echoed. That evening, I drove home alone through the dark streets of Chicago, the city lights blurring past me in a wash of red and white and gold. I thought about the morning I had walked out of Catherine's house, driven by anger and frustration, and stopped at a bus stop where a girl named Maya had handed me a watch that changed everything. He thought about the weeks that had followed, the sleepless nights, the careful planning, the steady accumulation of evidence. I thought about the moment Catherine had looked at me with something like hope in her eyes, and the moment James had finally found the courage to stop running. And I thought about what lay ahead. Eleanor Mason was not going to go down without a fight. She had too much to lose, too much she had built, too many lies she had constructed over years. But we had something she didn't have. We had the truth. He pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a long moment, the engine ticking as it cooled. The house was dark. I had forgotten to leave the light on, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of the darkness pressing down on me. He felt something else. Something that felt almost like readiness. The assistant U.S. attorney assigned to the case was a woman named Sarah Chun. She was in her late 30s, sharp and focused, with the kind of relentless attention to detail that made her ideal for a case as complex as this one. Patricia and I met with her on Monday morning in the Federal Building, the same building where the forged signature document had been filed, the same building where Eleanor Mason's crimes had been recorded in the official record. Sarah Chun laid out the prosecution's strategy with clinical precision. securities fraud, extortion, conspiracy, and wire fraud, a half-dozen charges that carried substantial prison time. She had reviewed the evidence, spoken to the witnesses, and concluded that the case was strong enough to proceed to the grand jury within 10 days. "There's one complication," she said, her voice level. "Catherine's gambling addiction will be used against her. The defense will portray her as unreliable, as the architect of her own destruction. They will argue that Eleanor was only trying to help, that Catherine's memory is compromised by her addiction and the stress of her situation." I listened carefully, my hand steady on the table. "You understand that? But Catherine's addiction doesn't change what Eleanor did. It doesn't change the forged documents, the extortion, the pattern of control that predates Catherine's involvement. Catherine is not the criminal here." Sarah nodded slowly. "I agree with you. But I need to be able to present it that way. You need Catherine to be a credible witness. I need her to be honest about her struggles, to own them, so that the defense can't weaponize them against her." I left the meeting with a clearer understanding of what was at stake. The case was strong, but it wasn't guaranteed. Eleanor Mason had spent years building her whip, and she wasn't going to let it collapse without a fight. But neither was I. The grand jury hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the days leading up to it, Catherine and James met with Patricia multiple times, preparing their testimony, strengthening their resolve. He came to each meeting, not as a witness but as a presence, someone they could look to when the weight of the preparation became too heavy. Catherine spoke haltingly at first, her voice thin and hesitant, but with each session she grew stronger. She no longer apologized for her addiction, for the things she had done, for the choices she had made. She acknowledged them, accepted them, and then moved forward. James was quiet and steady, his testimony precise and unwavering. He described the night of the injury with clinical detachment, holding Catherine's hand throughout, never flinching from the details. He watched my daughter transform in those 2 weeks. The shame that had been the foundation of her existence for 18 months slowly loosened its grip. She stopped averting her eyes. She stopped apologizing for taking up space. She began to stand straighter, her shoulders back, her head held high. She was still fragile, still wounded, but she was healing. And for that, I was more grateful than I could ever put into words. The day of the grand jury hearing arrived cold and clear, the November sky a hard bright blue that seemed to reflect the clarity of what was about to happen. He drove Catherine and James to the federal building myself, parking in the underground garage, watching them walk ahead of me through the metal detectors and security checkpoints. Catherine's hand was shaking slightly as she signed in at the front desk, but her voice was steady when she spoke to the clerk. He stood with James in the waiting area while she testified, the minutes stretching into an hour, then 2. James paced silently, his hands in his pockets, his jaw tight. He sat in one of the plastic chairs and waited. When Catherine emerged from the grand jury room, her face was pale but composed. She walked toward us with a steadiness I hadn't seen in months, and when she reached us, she simply said, "It's over." He told them everything. He stood up and put my arms around her. She held onto me tightly, and I felt the tension leave her body in slow waves. James came up behind her and wrapped his arms around both of us, and for a moment, the three of us just stood there in the hallway of the federal building, holding each other, not caring who might be watching. The indictment came down 3 days later. Eleanor Mason was charged with securities fraud, extortion, conspiracy, and wire fraud, a total of 7 counts, each carrying substantial prison time. The news hit the media on the evening of November 20th, and by the next morning, it was everywhere. The woman with the iron gate and the perfect house and the carefully maintained reputation was being exposed as a fraud, a manipulator, a predator. He didn't celebrate. There was no victory in seeing someone brought low, even someone who deserved it. What I felt was closer to relief, the sense of a weight lifting, a pressure releasing, a door finally opening after months of darkness. Catherine and James moved back into their house on Magnolia Boulevard. The iron gate stayed, but it no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a boundary, a marker of something they had reclaimed. He drove back to the bus stop on Ashford Street on a cold December morning, the same bench where Maya had been sitting when she handed me Catherine's watch. She was there again, in her too large jacket and her too small shoes, eating what looked like half a granola bar with the focused attention of someone for whom food is not a casual activity. Edward Whitfield, she said when she saw me. Is everything okay with your daughter? He sat down beside her on the bench. It's getting there, I said slowly. It's getting there. Maya nodded, the same single serious nod from the first morning, and went back to eating her granola bar. He sat with her for a long moment, watching the cold December light filter through the bare branches of the oak trees. Maya, I said, if there's ever anything you need, anything, you can call me. She looked at me with those brown eyes, alert and direct. I will, Edward Whitfield. Thank you. He stood up, turned my collar against the wind, and walked back to my car. The work that mattered most was done. It had started here on this bench with a girl who told the truth, and it had ended here with the same girl, still hungry, still too thin, still carrying the weight of a life that shouldn't be so hard. He would not forget her. He could not forget her. She had given me back my daughter, and I owed her more than I could ever repay. But I would try. He would spend the rest of my life trying. The trial of Eleanor Mason began in February. Catherine and James testified for 2 days, their voices steady, their words precise. He sat in the gallery every single day, watching my daughter speak with a courage I had never known she possessed. Eleanor's attorneys threw everything they had, attacks on Catherine's credibility, insinuations about her addiction, efforts to paint her as the architect of her own destruction. But the evidence was overwhelming, the testimony unshakable, and the jury deliberation lasted only 4 hours before they returned their verdict, guilty on all counts. Eleanor Mason was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. He did not feel satisfaction when the judge pronounced sentence. He felt something closer to peace, the end of a chapter, the closing of a door that should never have been opened. Catherine and James walked out of the courthouse together, hand in hand, and I watched them go, thinking about all the mornings I had driven past their house and told myself they needed space. That ended today. In the months that followed, Catherine rebuilt her life piece by piece. She entered treatment for her gambling addiction, a program that required her to confront the shame she had been carrying for years. James stayed by her side through every session, every setback, every difficult conversation. They sold the house on Magnolia Boulevard and bought a smaller place in a quieter neighborhood, with a garden and a fence and no iron gate. He visited them on Sundays, sitting in the warm kitchen while Catherine made coffee and James read the paper in the next room. It was ordinary, and it was everything. Maya graduated from 8th grade that spring. He attended the ceremony in a small auditorium on the city's south side, sitting in the back row with Diane Vance, the woman from the coffee shop who had been feeding Maya blueberry muffins all year long. Maya walked across the stage with her head held high, her dark hair pulled back, a small smile on her face. After the ceremony, she came and sat beside me, and we talked about nothing in particular, her plans, her grades, her dreams. Before she left, she handed me a piece of paper. "I wrote this for you," she said. "It's not much, but I wanted you to have it." He unfolded the paper and read it. "Thank you, Edward Whitfield, for seeing me that day. For trusting me. For not forgetting me. Maya." I still have that piece of paper. I carry it in my wallet, next to the picture of Catherine on her wedding day, next to the card Hugo gave me on my 50th birthday. It reminds me of something I almost lost. Not just my daughter, but my faith in the idea that even in the darkest moments, there are people who will help you find the light. I tell you this story not because it ends well, though it does, slowly, imperfectly, the way real things end. I tell you this story because I almost let pride keep me from seeing what was right in front of me. He was a father who built walls and called them wisdom. Don't be me. If someone you love is struggling, walk toward them before the distance becomes a wall neither of you can climb. This story taught me that betrayal rarely arrives as a stranger. It wears a familiar face, speaks in a gentle voice, and finds the exact thing you are most afraid to lose. This is the truth about family betrayal. It is most powerful when it comes from inside the house. I believe that no amount of money, no contract, no iron gate protects a family better than honest conversation. I believe that a child with nothing but integrity can change the direction of a person with everything. And I believe that God places the right people in our path at exactly the right moment, even when those people are sitting on a cold bench with worn-out shoes. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the truth is, we are all one moment away from meeting the person who will help us find our way back home. The morning of Eleanor Mason's sentencing, I woke before dawn and stood at my kitchen window, watching the first gray light creep across the Chicago skyline. 3 months had passed since the guilty verdict, 3 months of Catherine rebuilding her life piece by piece, 3 months of learning to trust again. He had not spoken to Eleanor since the trial ended. There was nothing left to say to her. But today, I would sit in that courtroom and watch the final chapter of this story close, and I wanted to be clear-headed for it. I made coffee, sat at my desk, and opened the leather-bound journal I had been keeping since the day Maya handed me Catherine's watch at the bus stop. He had written in it every night, not for publication, not for anyone else to read, but because I needed to make sense of what had happened. He needed to understand how a family could be dismantled from the inside, piece by piece, by someone who wore a mask of warmth and concern while she systematically destroyed everything she touched. Catherine and James picked me up at 8:30. Catherine was wearing a simple gray dress, her hair pulled back, her face calm in a way I hadn't seen in years. James held her hand as they walked up the front path, and when I opened the door, I saw something in their eyes that I had been waiting to see for a very long time: peace. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but something closer to acceptance. The acceptance of what had happened, what they had survived, and what they still had left to build together. "Ready?" he asked. Catherine nodded. "Ready." The courthouse was the same one where the trial had been held, the same marble hallways, the same security checkpoints. He had walked through these doors dozens of times over the past several months, each time carrying a different weight. Today, the weight felt lighter. He was not carrying anger or fear or the desperate hope that justice would be served. He was carrying something simpler, the certainty that the truth had been told, and that whatever happened next, my daughter was free. Eleanor Mason was brought into the courtroom in a gray prison jumpsuit, her hands cuffed in front of her, her hair flat and unwashed. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with the clothes she was wearing. The woman who had once swept through rooms with the confidence of someone who owned everything in them now shuffled toward the defendant's table with the broken posture of someone who had lost everything. He felt a flicker of something. Not pity, exactly, but something close. She had chosen this path. She had built this prison for herself, brick by brick, la by la. But she was still a human being, still someone's mother, still someone who had once been capable of love before she let her hunger for control consume everything good in her. Who'd hit Patricia Morrison, the same judge who had presided over the trial, called the court to order. She looked at Eleanor with the measured neutrality of a woman who had seen every kind of human failure in her decades on the bench, and she read the sentence with a voice that carried no emotion beyond the necessary gravity of the moment. 12 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release, restitution to the victims in the amount of $142,000, and a permanent injunction barring Eleanor Mason from any future involvement in the financial affairs of any person or entity not directly related to her by blood. Catherine's hand tightened on mine when the sentence was read. I looked at her, and I saw tears streaming down her face, but she was not crying from pain. She was crying from release. It was finally, truly over. As Eleanor was led from the courtroom, she turned and looked directly at Catherine. Her face was unreadable, no anger, no remorse, no regret. Used to flat emptiness that seemed to acknowledge, in some distant way, that she had been beaten. She looked at me too, just for a moment, and then she was gone, led through the heavy doors to the holding cells, to the transport van, to the beginning of 12 years of silence. We did not celebrate that evening. There was no champagne, no toast to victory. Instead, we went back to Catherine and James's new house, the smaller house on the quieter street, the one with the garden and the fence and no iron gate. We sat in the kitchen, the same kind of kitchen where everything had started 18 months ago, but different now. The light was different. The air was different. The silence between us was not the heavy, suffocating silence of secrets and lies. It was the comfortable silence of people who had been through something together and come out the other side. He made coffee. Catherine cut a loaf of banana bread she had baked the night before, a small, ordinary act that felt like a triumph. James sat in the corner reading the newspaper, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt something I had forgotten was possible, contentment. Maja came to visit that weekend. He had arranged it with Diane, the woman from the cafe, who had become a kind of guardian to her over the past several months. Maya was dressed in clean clothes, a pair of jeans that fit her properly, a jacket that didn't swallow her whole. She looked healthier than she had that first morning on the bus stop bench, but there was still a wariness in her eyes, the residue of a life that had taught her to expect the worst. Catherine met her at the door, and I watched as my daughter knelt down to Maya's level and spoke to her in a voice I hadn't heard in years, soft, gentle, full of the kind of warmth that comes from someone who has been through their own darkness and knows what it means to need a light. I hear you've been taking care of my dad, Catherine said, a small smile playing at her lips. Maja looked at her with those direct, serious eyes. He was taking care of me too. Catherine laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound I had heard in a very long time. We spent the afternoon together, Catherine, James, Maja, Diane, and me. We ate pizza on paper plates, the kind that gets grease stains on the cardboard. We played cards at the kitchen table, James pretending to lose so Maya could win, Catherine laughing when he fumbled his hand. It was ordinary. It was small. It was everything. That night, after everyone had gone home, I walked out onto Catherine's back porch and looked up at the stars. The city lights made them faint, but they were there, a reminder that there is always something larger than the darkness we carry. Maja came out and stood beside me, her thin arms wrapped around herself against the cold. Edward Whitfield, she said quietly, do you think things will ever be normal again? I looked down at her, at this girl who had given me back my daughter, who had started all of this simply by telling the truth when I asked. Normal is overrated, I said. But things will be good again. They already are, in their own way. Maja nodded slowly. She was quiet for a moment, and then she asked the question I had been waiting for her to ask. What happens to me now? I turned to face her, this girl who had no family, no home that was truly hers, no one to hold her when she was scared. We figure it out, I said. Together. She looked at me for a long moment, searching my face for something, a promise, a guarantee. I didn't have guarantees. He had something better, determination. He called Diane Vance the next morning. We met at the Ashford Cafe, the same place where she had first told me about Eleanor's meetings with Vincent Calder, the same place where she had handed Maya a blueberry muffin and told her to keep the bag. He sat across from her at one of the small tables, a cup of coffee growing cold between us, and I told her what I wanted to do. I want to help Maya, I said. I want to give her a place to stay, a way to go to school, a chance to build something for herself. I want to be her guardian, if she'll let me. Diane looked at me with the careful, assessing eyes of someone who had seen too many promises broken to trust easily. You don't even know her, she said. You've met her a handful of times. He shook my head. I know enough. I know she's honest, even when it costs her. I know she's brave, even when she's scared. I know she's kind, even when the world hasn't been kind to her. And I know that without her, I wouldn't have my daughter back. Diane was quiet for a long moment. Sis been through a lot, she said finally. More than any kid should have to go through. She doesn't trust easily, and she has good reason not to. He leaned forward. I'm not asking her to trust me. I'm asking her to give me a chance to earn it. Diane studied me for another long moment, and then something in her expression shifted. I'll talk to her, she said. But Edward, if you hurt her, I will find you, and I will make you regret it. He smiled. I'd expect nothing less. Maja moved into the guest room of my house 3 weeks later. She arrived with a single duffel bag that held everything she owned, and she stood in the doorway of her new room with the same wary, careful expression she had worn on the bus stop bench that first morning. This is all mine, she asked. He nodded. All yours. She walked inside slowly, touching the edges of the bed, the desk, the window that looked out over the backyard. She turned to me, and for the first time since I had met her, I saw her smile, a small, hesitant smile that didn't quite reach her eyes but was real nonetheless. Thank you, Edward Whitfield, she said. I didn't correct her. Intime, she would call me something else. But for now, Edward Whitfield was enough. Life, in the months that followed, found a rhythm I hadn't known I was missing. I drove Maya to school in the mornings, the same route that had once taken me past Catherine's old house on Magnolia Boulevard, the one with the iron gate and the gold accents and the carefully curated emptiness. He watched her walk through the doors of a school that had uniforms and a library and teachers who knew her name. He picked her up in the afternoons and listened as she told me about her classes, about the girls who had started sitting with her at lunch, about the art teacher who had praised her drawing. She was still cautious, still guarded, but she was opening up, petal by petal, like a flower that had been kept in the dark for too long and was just beginning to remember what the light felt like. Catherine and James came over for dinner every Sunday. Catherine had started a new job at a small accounting firm, the kind of place where she could rebuild her career without the pressure of the old firm, where everyone knew her story and didn't judge her for it. James had started a small landscaping business, the kind that let him work outside with his hands and sleep soundly at night. They were happy. Not perfectly happy, not the kind of happiness that exists in movies or novels, but the real kind. The kind that comes from knowing you have survived something and come out stronger on the other side. He still visited Hugo's shop on Dearborn Street, though less often now. The bell still chimed when I walked through the door. The smell of machine oil and cedar still hit me like a memory. Hugo still bent over his workbench, his loupe pressed to his eye, his hands as steady as they had been 42 years ago. He looked up when he heard my footsteps, and he smiled. A rare thing for Hugo, a sign that he was genuinely glad to see me. "How's the girl?" he asked. "She's good," I said. "Better than good. She's thriving." Hugo nodded, satisfied. "And Catherine?" "She's healing. Slowly, but she's healing." Hugo set down his tools and walked over to the display case. He pulled out a small box, worn and faded, and handed it to me. Inside was a watch, an old one, vintage, with a silver face and leather band that had been carefully restored. "I've been working on this for a while," he said. "Thought you might want it. For Maya. For when she's ready to know that someone is watching over her." I looked at the watch, at the careful craftsmanship, at the inscription engraved on the back, "For Maya, who told the truth." "May you always be brave." My throat tightened. "Hugo, I don't know what to say." He waved the hand dismissively. "You don't have to say anything. Just give it to her. And tell her that the truth is the most valuable thing she will ever own." He put the watch in my pocket and hugged him, a rare gesture for both of us, but one that felt right. He clapped me on the back and pushed me toward the door. "Go home, Edward. She's waiting." He gave Maya the watch that night, after dinner, when the house was quiet and the city lights were flickering through the windows. She held it in her hands, turning it over, reading the inscription, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Edward Whitfield," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is too much." He knelt down beside her chair. "Maya, what you did that morning at the bus stop, telling me the truth, keeping the bag, trusting me, had changed everything. You changed everything. You gave me back my daughter. You gave me back my family. This watch is a reminder, the truth is the most valuable thing you will ever own. Don't ever let anyone make you forget that." Maya looked at me for a long moment, and then she reached out and hugged me, a real hug, the kind that comes from a place deep inside, the kind that says more than words ever could. "Thank you, Dad," she said. He felt my throat tighten again, the tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "You're welcome," I said. "You're welcome, Maya." Eleanor Mason was transferred to a federal prison in West Virginia 3 months after her sentencing. He did not visit her. He did not write to her. There was nothing left to say. But I thought about her sometimes, in the quiet moments when my mind wandered, and I wondered what had happened to her to make her believe that the only way to survive was to control everyone around her. he would never know the answer. That was not my burden to carry. My burden was to heal, to help my family heal, to build something better on the wreckage she had left behind. Catherine gave birth to a daughter in September. I was in the delivery room when she arrived, a tiny, screaming bundle of life that seemed to contain the hope of the entire world. Catherine held her in her arms, tears streaming down her face, and she said the name she had chosen months ago, in the dark days when she wasn't sure she would ever see this moment, Maya. I'm naming her Maya. I looked at James, who was standing beside Catherine, his face wet with his own tears, and I nodded. It was the right name. It was the only name. They knew Maya grew up surrounded by love. Her grandmother Diane visited every week, bringing muffins and books and stories. Her uncle James taught her how to garden, how to plant seeds and wait for them to grow. Her great-uncle Hugo showed her how to fix watches, how to hold a lute, how to see the beauty in small things. And he was her grandfather, the one who told her stories, the one who took her to the bus stop on Ashford Street and pointed to the bench where a girl named Maya had once sat, holding a watch, changing everything. That's where your name comes from, I told her. From a girl who told the truth, even when it was hard. They knew Maya was too young to understand, but she would learn. In Time, she would hear the whole story. The story of her mother and her father, of the woman who had tried to destroy them, of the girl who had saved them. She would learn that the truth is the most valuable thing you will ever own. And she would carry that truth forward, into her own life, into her own choices, into the person she would become. I think about that morning at the bus stop all the time now. The girl in the oversized jacket, her hands turning over the watch, her direct brown eyes. The moment I stopped walking and everything changed. I think about all the mornings I had driven past that bench without seeing it, all the moments I had missed, all the words I had left unsaid. But I don't dwell on regret. Regret is a weight that serves no purpose. What serves a purpose is gratitude. Gratitude for the girl who told the truth. Gratitude for my daughter, who found the courage to stand up and fight. Gratitude for the small, ordinary moments that make life worth living. And gratitude for the lesson that betrayal, no matter how deep, cannot destroy a family that chooses to stay together. If this story has taught me anything, it is this: love is not about perfection. It is about showing up, again and again, even when it's hard. It is about listening, even when you don't want to hear what someone has to say. It is about standing beside the people you care about, even when they have made mistakes, even when they have hurt you, even when they have pushed you away. Because the truth is, we are all one moment away from needing someone to stand beside us. And when that moment comes, we want to know that someone will be there. So I am asking you, whoever you are, wherever you are, show up. For the people you love. For the people who need you. For the people who might not even know they need you yet. Because the distance between a broken family and a healing one is measured not in miles, but in the moments when someone chooses to walk toward the person who is hurting instead of walking away. I still visit the bus stop sometimes, on cold mornings when the streets are quiet and the oak trees are bare. I sit on the bench where Maya first handed me the watch, and I think about all the people who have passed through my life and changed it. I think about Hugo, my oldest friend, who never stopped believing in me. I think about Diane, who fed a hungry girl and started a chain of events that saved my family. I think about Catherine, my brave daughter, who fought her way back from the darkness. I think about James, who stayed when it would have been easier to leave. And I think about Maya, my Maya. The girl who told the truth, the girl who became my daughter, the girl who reminded me that hope is never lost as long as someone is willing to reach out and hold on to it. That's where this story ends. Not with a triumphant victory or a grand finale, but with something quieter, a family sitting around a table, eating pizza on paper plates, laughing at old jokes, planning new days. A child sleeping in a room of her own, a watch on her nightstand engraved with words that remind her of who she is. A daughter holding her own baby, naming her after the girl who saved them all. And a father, standing at a window, watching the first light of a new dawn spread across the city, grateful for every moment that brought him here. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Thank you for listening, for caring, for being part of something that matters. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the people in your life and what they mean to you, then please do me a favor, reach out to someone you love and tell them. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until it's too late. Do it, right now, and remind them that they matter. And if you found value in this story, please consider hitting the like button, subscribing to this channel, and leaving a comment below. Your engagement helps more people find these stories, and more people need to hear that no matter how dark things get, there is always hope. There is always someone who will stand beside you. There is always a way forward. God bless you, and thank you for being here until the very end.